Welcome to the debate. Today we're diving into the core philosophy of personal security and threat detection. We're looking specifically at strategies discussed by the expert Max B, drawing on his, decades of experience protecting individuals all over the world. His counsel definitely carries some weight.
Right. And we're focusing on the internal tools, the mechanisms people use day to day to stay safe and aware.
Exactly. And the central question that really emerges from Max B's material is, it's quite interesting. Is effective threat avoidance primarily about disciplined, conscious, sort of cognitive analysis of your surroundings? Situational awareness, behavioral analysis?
Mm-hmm.
Or is the true foundation relying on those immediate, non-rational signals, the ones generated by that inner warning system, what we often call intuition?
A classic dichotomy, really.
It is. And my position, just to lay it out, is that while intuition, it provides a useful flag, the most reliable defense, and crucially the one you can actually train, is systematic, disciplined, proactive observation. I really think cognitive awareness is the only structure that allows for consistent prevention.
Okay. And I come at it from, a slightly different angle. I fully respect the need for structure, for training, absolutely. But I'd argue that intuition is the foundational survival skill. In dynamic situations, it's often faster. And because it's faster, it can be more accurate in triggering the necessary survival response than, slow, deliberate analysis. The strength really lies in the primal speed of that gut feeling.
Okay, so delving into my position, the foundation of reliable security, especially in the kinds of complex scenarios Max B often deals with, it's built on consistent, disciplined habit. When we talk situational awareness, we have to look at the intentional effort involved. This means things like the micropauses he mentions, those deliberate moments where you consciously check in with your senses. It's active cognition. You're asking specific questions when you enter a space. What's the baseline energy here? Who looks comfortable? Where's the nearest exit? This conscious effort establishes what he calls a baseline, the pattern of normal activity for that environment. And threats? Well, they're reliably detected because the opportunist, the criminal, they almost always violate this pre-established norm. So for security to really work effectively, it requires mental preparation, things like rehearsing simple what-if scenarios. This transforms reaction into prevention, and it helps prevent that catastrophic moment where someone just freezes during a crisis.
I see that. And while conscious observation is, undoubtedly useful, I still maintain that reliable security ultimately hinges on the speed of internal, subconscious processing. Max B talks explicitly about the inner warning system. Now, this isn't just some vague feeling, it's the culmination of millions of micro cues, body language, maybe even scent, tiny environmental shifts that the subconscious processes almost instantly. It generates an alarm long before our, frankly, slower rational minds can really articulate why we feel uneasy. And the material is unequivocal here. It says, don't dismiss these feelings. Intuition is the alarm bell, right? And ignoring it is dangerous. The key advantage is immediacy. So, immediate action based on instinct, whether that's crossing the street, leaving a building, maybe asking a clerk for help, that has to be prioritized over lingering to complete a full rational analysis. When seconds count, that primal wiring, it needs to take over.
Core debate.
The practicality of establishing a baseline in dynamic environments.
Okay, so let's talk about the baseline concept, because I see it as the central tool, and yes, it demands trainability. Professionals operating in varied environments, like the ones Max B protects, they train themselves to assess a space very, very quickly, seconds sometimes. Awareness involves rapidly assessing faces, body language, the interaction level. This is how individuals spot someone who seems unusually interested or is maybe invading personal space or just observing you in an uncomfortable way. Detecting these, quite nuanced behaviors demands conscious assessment against the norm that you've established, however quickly, when you arrived. The baseline, I think, acts as a cognitive anchor. It stops generalized anxiety from just misfiring the alarm all the time.
I recognize the benefit of training, absolutely, rigorous training, to assess a space quickly. But the sheer logistical challenge of relying on the baseline for immediate threat detection, especially for the average person who's often distracted, It raises serious doubts for me about its widespread utility. Think about complex travel situations, a big part of Max B's work, right? You step off a plane into a bustling, completely unfamiliar marketplace in a new city. Or you enter a crowded train station you've never seen before. What normal pattern do you really have to compare against in those first few moments?
Everything seems anomalous, doesn't it? The cognitive bandwidth required to accurately and rapidly establish a useful baseline in a genuinely novel, high-noise environment. It's immense. Intuition, I argue, bypasses that bottleneck. It works universally precisely because the observer might not have a comparison point. The subconscious just flags the immediate danger, cutting through all that sensory overload.
Okay, I acknowledge that high-noise, novel environments definitely present the biggest challenge to establishing a baseline quickly. But even in, say, a new market, you can quickly assess the rhythm of interaction, right? The level of haggling, the pace people are walking, the general volume of voices. When you spot the one person who's standing unnaturally still against that backdrop, or whose eyes are following you maybe too intensely without the normal interest in the goods around them, that anomaly is visible only because you forced yourself, even briefly, into that micropause, that assessment. If you rely only on a vague sense of unease, well, you're just as likely to flee from a street performer as you are from a genuine threat. We have to aim for some kind of validation, not just pure feeling.
Validation is a luxury, though. A luxury afforded by time, which you often don't have in these situations. If the subconscious has already signaled danger, that tightening in your gut, maybe the hair standing up on your neck, the optimal response, I believe, is immediate disengagement, not lingering to try and gather objective data. My concern is that requiring conscious assessment against the baseline, it can lead to hesitation. The baseline might serve proactive intelligence gathering, okay, but intuition serves the immediate survival response. When you're faced with a potential threat, what's wiser? Move instantly or stand still for 5 more seconds analyzing their body language?
Prioritizing behavioral cues versus emotional signals.
And this leads to my other concern, which is the risk of analysis paralysis that systematic assessment can induce. If we focus too intently on conscious behavioral analysis, mentally ticking off a list, are their hands hidden? Are their eyes shifting? Are they fidgeting excessively? We can distract ourselves from the fundamental goal, which is usually escape or avoidance. The intuitive signal is often simpler and more actionable. Danger? No danger. Cognitive analysis, on the other hand, requires filtering, interpretation, diagnosis. If a threat is closing the distance, trying to calculate probabilities based on where their hands are, well, you've just lost precious seconds that the intuitive alarm was specifically designed to save. We have to trust that primal wiring sometimes.
I agree that calculation shouldn't paralyze action, absolutely. But I think that misunderstands the role of systematic training. The kind of professional training Max B embodies, it aims not to slow you down, but actually to solidify the link between that intuitive signal and an objective cue. Intuition, when it's completely alone, can be inherently vague. It can be unreliable. It might be triggered by simple stress or, generalized anxiety. Security is strengthened by practice, by discipline, which allows you to spot small objective cues almost instantly. So when the subconscious flags unease, the trained eye immediately confirms, is this person sweating inappropriately? Are they subtly blocking my path? This discipline transforms a vague fear into something closer to evidence-based certainty. And that makes the resulting action, whether it's moving away or mentally rehearsing a conflict scenario, more effective and probably less panicked.
That's a compelling argument, I'll grant you, for the trained observer, the security professional. But for the average person, the non-security professional, focusing heavily on external behavioral analysis, well, it can often be distracting. Or worse, it could lead to errors in judgment based on confirmation bias or even stereotypes. The material teaches that the fastest defense is internal. So if the goal is immediate survival for the average citizen, shouldn't they focus on that internal distress signal and just react? React instantly, rather than attempting to read the perpetrator, which demands diverting precious mental energy externally while under significant stress. The intuitive response keeps your focus on your own environment, your own path of escape.
But this brings us right back to preparedness, doesn't it?
We're not suggesting complex calculus in the moment. We're talking about mental rehearsal beforehand. If you've already rehearsed simple what-if scenarios, like if someone blocks the door, I'll move towards the window, then the moment that subconscious signal fires and your eye spots the confirming behavioral cue, like the person actually moving to block the exit, the action is essentially preloaded. It bypasses lengthy analysis entirely in that critical moment. Systematic awareness is the skill of preparing the mind for that trigger point. It aims to turn a reactive, fear-driven freeze into a proactive, rehearsed move.
Predictability and varying routines.
And systematic awareness is intrinsically linked to proactive risk mitigation, too. We have to consider the higher-level cognitive strategies that the material advises. Things like deliberately varying your habits, changing your routes to work, parking in different locations. This intentional variation is a sophisticated cognitive strategy against predictability. Predictability is the enemy of security, we know that. And the conscious choice to disrupt your own routine demonstrates the power of disciplined planning over just reacting to things. And this applies just as much to digital security, right? Changing passwords regularly, using two-factor authentication. These aren't intuitive actions at all. They are disciplined preventative strategies based on a cognitive awareness of risk.
I wholeheartedly agree that predictability is a massive cognitive error in security. Avoiding predictable patterns is absolutely foundational to not becoming an easy target in the first place. However, even this cognitive planning, this intentional variation, it has its own potential pitfalls. Constantly forcing novelty, changing routes, changing habits, it increases cognitive load. The mind naturally seeks patterns. It likes routine. When we constantly disrupt these patterns, we're expending mental energy. And if you're constantly forcing your mind into novelty, you might, ironically, be more prone to distraction or exhaustion. So, when your cognitive bandwidth is already strained by the new route, the new parking spot, the new complex password you just created, what's the single most reliable fallback system if an immediate threat suddenly materializes? It comes back to intuition, doesn't it?
But the very success of security planning, particularly for individuals facing potential targeted threats like Max Bling's clients often do, depends on making those disciplined variations routine in themselves. The practice is to integrate the variation so it becomes a new, non-predictable habit. It's not about constant strain, but building a resilient baseline of non-predictability. Furthermore, look at digital safety, which is a core component of personal security today. We have to actively protect information. We need to be aware of phishing cues, data breaches. Intuition doesn't really help you spot a clever phishing email. That requires disciplined, active analysis of external cues, the URL, the sender's grammar, the request being made. This just demonstrates, I think, that security is fundamentally a cognitive discipline that applies across all threat vectors, physical and digital.
Okay, I'll concede that digital security is almost entirely a matter of learned, systematic discipline. That's fair. However, when we return to the moment of physical threat detection, that immediate alarm still feels primarily intuitive. You can take a new route every single day, minimizing the pre-planning opportunity for an attacker. But if you step onto that carefully varied route one morning and your inner warning system just flares up, that sudden sense of dread, you must trust that signal instantly. The detection of the specific threat, right there, right then, still seems to require that fast, non-rational alarm, regardless of how excellent your cognitive planning has been up to that point.
Conclusion.
So ultimately, while conscious awareness clearly offers crucial layers of security, it enables disciplined planning, helps protect digital identities, lets us vary routines effectively, the core survival mechanism, especially when you're faced with an immediate, unexpected physical threat, well, it still feels like it remains that immediate, trustworthy signal of intuition. That subconscious processing power is our primal, essential defense, the one that operates when all our cognitive systems might be overloaded or haven't caught up yet.
And I'd frame it as reliable safety is achieved not just by hoping that primal defense kicks in correctly, but through continuous discipline. Using those micro pauses, consciously rehearsing scenarios, actively analyzing cues, This transforms what might otherwise be purely reactive, maybe fear-driven behavior, into proactive prevention. It's the structured practice of really looking at faces, at body language, at the energy of a place that allows us to stay ahead of the threat, ideally with validated certainty, not just a feeling.
We certainly converge, though, on the absolute necessity of avoiding distraction. That's perhaps the greatest security flaw for the modern person, isn't it? Just putting away the phone, being present in your environment, that allows both the cognitive system and the intuitive system to actually function properly.
Absolutely. And the true value, I think, of exploring this through Moxby framework is understanding how individuals need to learn to properly weight and prioritize their attention, whether they are directing it internally toward that immediate warning system or externally towards systematic analysis and observation. Getting that balance right is key to ensuring the highest level of resilience, really, in any environment.
Always a pleasure to explore these critical nuances.